Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we are going to talk through The Matter with Things, Our Brains, Our Delusions and the Unmaking of the World by Iain McGilchrist. There are 3 sections, and this is the third part of the summary. McGilchrist discusses the concept of self and its relationship to spirituality and cognitive science. He highlights the importance of personal, effective aspects of cognition and warns against reducing cognition to abstract, mechanical processes. The author explores the paradox of the self as both something to celebrate and deny, and questions whether it is an illusion or the purpose of our existence. He also delves into the distinction between the self as conceived by the left and right hemispheres of the brain, with the right hemisphere supporting a more fluid, connected sense of self. He emphasizes the need to nurture and transform the self, rather than destroy it, in order to empathize with others and incorporate their experiences. The left hemisphere of the brain struggles to understand the concept of time and how to integrate it into our understanding of the world. In Eastern thought, as well as in Western philosophy, there has been an important dialectic between the individual and the whole, the specific and the infinite. The Bhagavad Gita advises that pure knowledge lies in recognizing the eternal within the transient and the infinite within the finite, rather than focusing on the diversity and limitations of things. Both the individual and the whole, the unique and the general, are necessary and interconnected aspects of reality, but the right hemisphere of the brain is better equipped to perceive and appreciate this. The left hemisphere often simplifies and categorizes things, while the right hemisphere sees the complexity and interconnectedness of the world. McGilchrist's book also explores different philosophical views on time, arguing that time is not a thing, but a process of becoming that needs to be experienced and embraced. The left hemisphere tends to freeze time and fragment reality, while the right hemisphere sees time as flowing and inseparable from our perception of value and purpose. The right hemisphere's perspective on time and reality is more aligned with truth and should be given priority over the left hemisphere's understanding. The concept of thing in the English language has a rich and varied history, deriving from a range of uses in ancient languages such as Old Saxon, Old English, German, Dutch, Norwegian, Swedish, and Icelandic. The word thing originally meant an assembly for judicial or deliberative purposes and evolved to mean a matter or affair brought before a court. The root thing can also mean a cause and is related to the French word chose and the Italian and Spanish word cosa. The idea of a thing as a fixed and isolated object emerged over time, but originally, things were dynamic processes that involved multiple parties. Our understanding of time and space is also shaped by language and culture. Different languages spatialize time differently, with Western societies predominantly using linear representations of time, while Chinese, Indian, and Native American cultures favor circular representations. Linear time is associated with progress and individuality, while circular time is connected to nature and community. Ultimately, our experience of time and space is deeply intertwined with our consciousness. Different cultures and languages have different ways of conceptualizing time, with some relating it to spatial direction or volume. Representations of time often depend on space more than representations of space depend on time. The author also highlights Bergson's distinction between intellect and intuition, where intellect sees things as separate and frozen in time, while intuition experiences the undivided flow of time. Bergson's theories have been largely overlooked, but authors argue for their importance and relevance, particularly in relation to quantum mechanics and the nature of consciousness. Bergson believed that intuition, associated with the right hemisphere of the brain, modeled life itself, while intellect, associated with the left hemisphere, was incapable of understanding intuition and life. This is supported by neuropsychological research. Bergson suggested that our intellect allows us to isolate and focus on useful things, because it offers opportunities for the left hemisphere to utilize them. He called this process converting intuition into symbols and emphasized that intellect works on the phantom of duration, not duration itself. Bergson's understanding of time aligns with physicist Lee Smollen's view that spacetime is not reality but a representation of motion. Bergson argued that the essence of duration is to flow and change, dismissing the idea of fixed states. He compared the flow of time to a continuous melody and emphasized the indivisibility of change. He called for a shift in attention away from practical interests in order to perceive reality directly, embracing both change and permanence. Bergson's perspective aligns with Eastern philosophical traditions and offers a different way of understanding time and reality. The right hemisphere sees things in relation to their past and future, bringing depth and life to our understanding of the world. Constituted time is a recording of time that has already passed and questions whether this can truly be considered as time. It contrasts with the right hemisphere's perspective, where time is seen as a constant becoming, never a static object. McGilchrist then delves into the impact of different views of time on philosophy, psychology, and mental health, particularly in relation to schizophrenia and the loss of flow and coherence in one's experience of time. The loss of the flow of time can lead to a sense of alienation and disconnection from the world. This loss of time is often experienced by individuals with schizophrenia, as well as by people in the modern age. Time is essential for the dynamic and flexible aspects of life, and without it, life becomes boring and lifeless. He also delves into the neurological aspects of time perception, highlighting the role of the right hemisphere in our sense of time. The breakdown of time is further examined, and the author argues that the left hemisphere's focus on certainty and stasis inhibits creativity and limits our understanding of reality. Additionally, the distinction between potential and actuality is explored, with the author suggesting that potential is as important, if not more important, than actuality in shaping our experiences and understanding of the world. He also explores the concepts of imagination, causation, and scale in relation to our understanding of reality. Romanticism, characterized by the imagination, is distinct from classical literature which relies on fancy or rearranging existing elements. Imagination brings forth something new and unseen. The left hemisphere, associated with fantasy and linear causation, is contrasted with the holistic nature of reality, where causation breaks down at the quantum level and effects can be their own causes. The significance of scale is highlighted, with linear causation being an artifact of the brain's left hemisphere that shears off what is not immediately relevant. Instead of control, McGilchrist suggests thinking in terms of communication. The concept of causation is explored, distinguishing between different types of causes and emphasizing the importance of the final cause. Time is not simply a linear sequence of moments, but rather a complex interplay between the past, present, and future. Our perception of time varies depending on factors such as our emotions, attention, and level of engagement in the present moment. McGilchrist also touches on the role of memory and anticipation in shaping our experience of time. Overall, he challenges the notion of time as a fixed and objective entity, instead emphasizing its subjective and malleable nature. Clock time is just one aspect of time, and it is a restricted one at that. A misunderstanding of Bergson's concept of the élan vital, which refers to the inherent drive in consciousness, has led to the belief that time is a physical substance that confers life. However, time is not regular and cannot be measured like money. Clock time is an invention of the mind and exists only in the normal world. Time is necessary for individuation and is inseparable from the evolving of difference and variety. It allows for freedom, creativity, and the meaningful existence of human beings. Time is both a force for differentiation and for cohesion, and it is fundamental to rhythms, cycles, and the functioning of the universe. Our consciousness depends on time, and we humans find meaning in our existence within time. Time is both continuous and differentiated, and its understanding is essential for grasping the relationship between the parts and the whole. McGilchrist explores the concept of time and eternity, highlighting the difficulty in understanding their relationship. Various philosophers and physicists have different perspectives on the matter. Some argue that eternity exists in the present moment, while others believe that time and eternity are interconnected. The author suggests that eternity is a qualitative rather than a quantitative concept, and that it can be experienced in the present moment. The discussion delves into the debate in physics regarding the existence of time. Time is real and fundamental, and that the perception of a timeless universe is flawed. Time is not a fixed entity but a condition of existence, constantly in flux. It is both the creator and destroyer, and that nothing is fixed or permanent. The author also criticizes the modern notion of time as a resource that can be saved, wasted, or lost, equating it to the left hemisphere's view of the world. The chapter concludes by emphasizing the importance of slowing down and appreciating the present moment, rather than constantly rushing to fit more into our lives. Time is a quality of the process of life and the condition of existence. Jason Paget, a man who developed an unusual affinity for creating diagrams after suffering a head injury. While some have described his abilities as a sudden genius for mathematics, there is evidence to suggest that his drawings are not actually related to mathematical equations. His drawings are composed of straight lines and do not represent the typical visuo-spatial imagery associated with mathematical problem solving. Instead, they seem to be a release phenomenon resulting from right hemisphere dysfunction, in which the left hemisphere's visual system has become overactive. Jason's perception of the world has changed since his injury, with everything appearing discrete, chunky, and made up of small tangent lines. His drawings often depict complex geometric shapes using only straight lines, demonstrating an obsession with symmetry and precision. Jason's abilities seem to conform to the left hemisphere's take on reality, with a focus on structure and detail rather than the fluidity of the natural world. The author presents ideas from philosophers such as Heraclitus, William James, and Henry Bergson, who argue that the universe, consciousness, and the self all flow. Flow is not just about change, but also about persistence and continuity. Conceptual thinking and language, which tend to fragment and freeze the flow, act as resistance and differentiation in the continuous stream of consciousness. However, they also note that continuity and discontinuity are both necessary to understand reality fully. By quoting Schelling's analogy of a stream to highlight how points of resistance in the flow give rise to the differentiation of nature's products. Resistance is not an external force, but part of the same creative energy it resists. In nature, resistance gives rise to whirlpools and organisms, which are constantly transforming and reproducing. Schelling believes that all creation is the result of this coincidentia oppositorum, where elements of otherness are incorporated within the creative force itself. The book also discusses the creative power of turbulence, which emerges from the flow itself and leads to the formation of vortices. Turbulence is unpredictable, diverse, and context-sensitive, and it exists as a balance of opposites. Resistance and turbulence are seen as essential components of creativity and the continual evolution of nature. Unity of nature gives rise to the multiplicity of phenomena through the element of resistance. This process of consciousness is seen as the self-creation of the absolute. McGilchrist then delves into the connection between music and philosophy, highlighting music's ability to express the essence of life and its close relationship to human existence. Music is described as a form of language that makes time audible and expresses both persistence and impermanence. Moving on to water, he suggests that water serves as a metaphor for the nature of reality, with its ability to transition seamlessly between solid, liquid, and gaseous forms. Water's unique properties, such as its ability to flow and form hydrogen bonds, make it a subject of study and fascination. Hydrogen bonds in water form cooperatively, making it difficult to model. Water's unique properties, such as expanding when freezing and its large heat capacity, contribute to its importance for life on Earth. The concept of Li, derived from Confucianism, represents the formal principle in all things and is considered the ordering principle in the world. This principle is dynamic and can be seen in the patterns of flowing water, as well as in other natural phenomena. Rhythm, both in music and in nature, plays a significant role in entraining the body and creating a sense of flow. Curves and spirals are seen as more living and dynamic compared to straight lines. Water and flow are essential elements in understanding the interconnectedness and patterns of life. Motion plays a crucial role in our understanding of reality and cognition. It is the tension between opposing forces, such as centripetal and centrifugal forces, that creates a vortex which separates and combines elements. Philosophers like Anaxagoras, Empedocles, and Democritus recognized motion as the cause of all things coming into being. While both motion and stasis are necessary elements of reality, the continuous and the moving are better appreciated by the right hemisphere of the brain, while the discrete and static are represented by the left hemisphere. The continuous is ontologically primary, reflecting the primacy of union over division. Movement is foundational and essential to all aspects of our mental life, as our knowledge is derived from action and interaction with the world. Even our thinking is closely linked to bodily movement, as bodily motion plays a significant role in reasoning and problem solving. The relationship between motion and cognition is evident in brain structure and function, as well as in certain neurological disorders. The close connection between thinking and moving is emphasized by the fact that thinking about an activity activates the parts of the brain associated with performing that action. Pathology has also shown that diseases traditionally thought to only affect motor function also impact cognition, such as in cases of motor neuron disease. Furthermore, the cerebral cortex, particularly the speech-motor cortex, plays a crucial role in understanding and retrieving action words. It is through the embodied experience of motion that our cognition is deeply rooted and enhanced. The cerebellum, often referred to as the little brain, contains approximately 80% of all the brain's neurons, despite its small size. While the cerebellum is traditionally associated with motor control, recent research suggests that it also plays a key role in emotional and social interaction. Abnormalities in the cerebellum have been linked to autism and affective and social disorders. Additionally, there are connections between the cerebellum and various parts of the brain involved in non-motor functions such as spatial awareness, spatial memory, visual processing, and language. The cerebellum is also implicated in higher-order cognitive processes such as reasoning, judgment, attention, and working memory. Overall, the cerebellum is crucial for the acquisition of cognitive, affective, and social skills. Abnormalities in movement can be seen in both schizophrenia and autism, indicating the close relationship between motor control and cognition. The writer explores the relationship between motion and cognition, highlighting the importance of movement in our perception and understanding of the world. Individuals with autism often struggle with the flow of thoughts and movements. Fragmentation of modern culture mirrors the loss of smoothness in motion. He also delves into the role of the right hemisphere in perceiving motion, human motion, and the goals and intentions underlying others' movements. Perception is an active process influenced by movement, and that emotion and ethics are inherently tied to action. Additionally, philosophical perspectives from Schelling, Bergson, and Leibniz are referenced to support the idea that motion is fundamental to existence. Motion is seen as an existent contradiction according to ancient dialecticians, and it is considered foundational, along with time and space. However, in Western education, motion is often seen as secondary to space and time, which are considered primary. It is suggested that movement is as foundational as space and time because they require each other. The left hemisphere of the brain tends to prioritize rest over motion, while analysis tends to yield stasis. Analysis and measurement attempt to reconstruct the world from stasis, but they cannot fully capture the mobility of reality. This limitation of analytic thinking highlights the importance of recognizing the deep nature of change and the impermanence of everything. The nature of space is contrasted with the living quality of time, while form is seen as more fundamental than matter. Forms are the result of motion and embody movement, while self-organizing patterns of complexity and beauty are found throughout the natural world. The writer explores the concept of depth in different contexts such as space, time, and emotion. He argues that depth cannot be easily defined or replaced by more approachable concepts. The metaphor of depth, particularly associated with the sea, encompasses both tangible and intangible aspects of existence. The idea of depth implies abundance, fertility, and mystery. Western society is losing its appreciation for depth due to a change in mindset and the influence of technology. He emphasizes the importance of relationships and the tension between connectedness and separation in experiencing depth. The Japanese concept of ma is introduced as a word for the interval and generative potential of space. The writer urges a deeper understanding and appreciation of depth in various aspects of life. Relationships between entities are primary, as entities become what they are only through their relations. All entities are interconnected and their thingness is an emergent property of the field. The right hemisphere of the brain has an advantage in comprehending depth in space and how spatial organization is right hemisphere-based. Spatial integration, navigation skills, and spatial memory rely on the right hemisphere. The writer then delves into the spatial distortions that occur in schizophrenia, which parallel those found in right hemisphere dysfunction. He discusses the loss of spatial depth in schizophrenia and how it affects perception and cognition. He also touches on the preference for symmetry in schizophrenia, autism, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and anorexia nervosa, and how changes in depth perception can have wide-ranging effects on experience. In one experiment, a lack of depth led to a dulling of perceptual experience and feelings of hostility and alienation. In contrast, when depth was expanded, participants experienced a psychedelic state, with enhanced perception and a sense of awe and interconnectedness. The writer also explores the relationship between modernism and schizophrenia, noting similarities in the avoidance of depth and celebration of shallowness. The left hemisphere is associated with a preference for fixed categories and either/or thinking, while the right hemisphere is more open to ambiguity and both and thinking. McGilchrist touches on the question of whether the physical foundations of reality are knowable and describes the limitations of observation and measurements in physics. The process of simulating reality on a computer involves translating the continuous nature of reality into discrete machine processes, which may prove challenging. The inability to simulate certain aspects of physics on a computer may indicate that the laws of physics are not inherently discrete but rather involve principles of topology and geometry. The author also discusses the concept of fields versus particles in physics, highlighting the idea that fields are the fundamental building blocks of nature, and particles are emergent properties of fields. Quantum fields in quantum field theory, QFT, and their relationship to particles is discussed. Particles, such as electrons and protons, are actually quanta of a field, and that fields are everywhere and exhibit characteristics of both discreteness and continuity. The view of reality as both discrete and continuous depending on observation is a more beautiful and complete description than the notion of a compromise or dualism between the two. Correlation, rather than measurement, is a more fundamental concept. The implications of quantum collapse and entanglement are also discussed, including their potential connection to consciousness and their presence at both microscopic and macroscopic levels. McGilchrist's book explores the concept of asymmetry and its relationship to the formation of the universe and living things. The asymmetry in the cosmic background radiation was necessary for the existence of the universe, as equal amounts of matter and antimatter would have cancelled each other out. This asymmetry is reflected in the asymmetrical forms of living beings, particularly in their neural networks. The presence of asymmetry is in various aspects of nature, such as the Fibonacci spiral found in pine cones and sunflowers, and the chirality of molecules. Asymmetry is not just a lack of symmetry, but a generative force that leads to the creation of new forms and patterns. Relationship between chance and necessity in the universe is explored, the author arguing that their interplay is crucial for the emergence of novelty. Complete order prevents adaptive changes and unconstrained disorder hinders self-organization. The concept of the edge of chaos is introduced as the most fruitful condition for open systems, including the human brain's creative potential. McGilchrist also explores the idea of asymmetry combined with symmetry, using examples such as sex chromosomes and the yin and yang symbol. Furthermore, challenging the assumption that matter gives rise to consciousness. Matter and consciousness are distinct phenomena that reflect different aspects of an indivisible reality. He challenges the idea that conscious thought is the pinnacle of consciousness, instead presenting it as a disruption to the efficient operation of habit. Self-conscious thought is only biologically important when habitual processes break down. Conscious thought should not be the default mode of action, and that philosophers often have mistaken views about the nature of rational action. Consciousness is not limited to the contents of our awareness, and that the subject-object divide may not be as robust as we assume. McGilchrist rejects the denial of consciousness and the reduction of consciousness to something else. Consciousness is a fundamental aspect of reality and cannot be explained by conventional scientific methods. Matter is an abstraction and that our perception of it is within our consciousness. McGilchrist suggests that consciousness must be added to the list of fundamental components of the world, similar to mass or electric charge. He also discusses the limitations of physics in fully understanding the nature of reality and consciousness. He introduces the idea of complementarity, where consciousness and matter are considered as different aspects of the same reality, and concludes that while matter and consciousness are distinct, they may be interconnected and dependent on each other. Our approach to nature governs what we find, and that reality is not an illusion, but rather that matter, as we think of it, is the illusion. Several physicists, including Max Planck and Eugene Wigner, have expressed similar views, stating that consciousness is the ultimate reality and that the universe is mental in nature. The author acknowledges that our consciousness plays a role in shaping reality, but also highlights the reciprocal relationship between humans and the universe. He discusses the relationship of reciprocity and the idea that both the observer and the observed are changed in this relationship. Referencing Goethe's belief that contemplation of an object generates in the beholder the faculty proper to its perception. Things emerge from our descriptions and perceptions of experience. He highlights the importance of perspective and scale in observing and understanding the nature of things, using examples from ant colonies and quantum physics. The concept of panpsychism suggests that consciousness is present in everything that exists and explores the relationship between mind and matter. The author emphasizes the need for an adequate scientific theory of reality that includes the experiences of everyday life. He discusses the idea of an I-thou relationship between humans and nature, emphasizing the interconnectedness and interdependence we have with the natural world. He challenges the notion that complex neuronal structures are necessary for awareness, examining cases where minimal or non-existent cortical function still allows for consciousness and awareness. Examples from slime molds and plants are provided to illustrate the capacity for awareness and intelligent behavior in organisms without neurons. Consciousness may extend beyond the brain, and that a holistic understanding of consciousness should encompass the entire body and the interactions between all its parts. Plants have the ability to learn and remember, as well as exhibit intelligent behavior. They can differentiate between familiar and unfamiliar stimuli and respond appropriately. Plants weigh the risks of closing or remaining open based on the energy cost involved. They can anticipate changes in the environment and adjust their responses accordingly. Plants also communicate with each other through complex networks of fungi and share resources. They exhibit movement and foraging behaviors, and their growth and form change in response to their intentions. Plant cells make decisions based on assessing various sources of information, and electromagnetic radiation influences their biological processes. While it is difficult to determine the level of awareness and experientiality in single-cell organisms and plants, their abilities indicate a form of consciousness beyond what is traditionally attributed to them. Evidence shows that non-human animals, such as fish, crabs, and birds, have the ability to experience pain and consciousness. These animals exhibit behaviors that suggest they can feel pain, such as preferentially swimming into water containing pain-killing substances. The author argues against the idea that consciousness emerged late in evolution and instead proposes that it has always been present but has undergone transformation. He also explores the role of quantum mechanics in consciousness, suggesting that quantum effects may play a role in the brain's functioning and the cohering of consciousness. He highlights the importance of recognizing the interrelatedness of mind and body, as demonstrated by the placebo effect. Attempts to understand consciousness solely through the brain are limited and fail to address the bigger question. McGilchrist discusses the relationship between hypnosis and physiological changes, highlighting the effects of suggestion on the body. He also mentions the ability of beliefs to change the brain, as seen in cognitive therapy. He argues against the notion that the mind cannot affect matter and presents a case report of a woman with multiple personality disorder as evidence. Paranormal phenomena should be subject to scientific investigation, despite the challenges it presents. The role of consciousness in decision-making and the limitations of experiments on free will are also discussed. The writer proposes that the brain acts as a filter, permitting certain aspects of consciousness to come into being. James, a philosopher mentioned in the book, suggests that the brain shapes and filters consciousness, giving it unique qualities. This filtering process is compared to a sculptor shaping a block of stone. Other philosophers, such as Bergson and Schiller, also believe that the brain limits and restricts consciousness. Studies show brain injuries can inhibit consciousness, but also consciousness can be regained through the vicarious action of other brain parts. Near-death experiences and terminal lucidity challenge the conventional understanding of consciousness and brain function. Consciousness is not separate from the physical world but is an inherent aspect of it. The concept of Weltseele, or world soul, is a primordial energy that flows through the cosmos and gives rise to individual consciousnesses. Consciousness is not a result of matter, but rather that matter is a result of consciousness. McGilchrist also delves into the concept of open systems, which are complex and dynamic systems that cannot be fully understood through reductionist analysis. He suggests that the study of life and consciousness can provide insights into the nature of the universe, and challenges the assumptions of contemporary physics. He argues that organisms are indications that the laws we currently know are incomplete and inadequate to explain life. Rather than being a special case reducible to these laws, biology actually highlights their inadequacy. The alternative to these mechanistic laws is a more generic view of the scientific world, where mechanistic laws are the special cases. This view suggests that consciousness and organicism may be foundational principles of the cosmos. Matter is not separate from consciousness but is a product of primal consciousness. The grounding consciousness is not deterministic, but in the process of discovering itself through its creative potential. Consciousness is integral and must be divided to produce differentiation and individuation. However, the scientific reception of these ideas is hindered by the difficulty of localizing and measuring consciousness. The writer draws upon the ideas of philosophers, physicists, and psychologists. The notion that consciousness is not wholly personal but rather connected to a larger whole is supported by figures such as Averroes, Einstein, and Bohm. There is a belief in many cultures that consciousness exists beyond the boundaries of the individual. Furthermore, McGilchrist highlights the role of attention in shaping our experience of the world and suggests that the differences in attention between the brain's hemispheres could have implications for our perception of reality. He also explores the parallels between psychology and physics, suggesting that the complementary nature of reality reflects the complementarity of the brain's two modes of attention. The relationship between waves, oscillations, and energy levels in atomic systems is discussed. The number of oscillations must be a whole number in order for the wave to coincide with its starting point, leading to discrete levels of energy. The writer presents diagrams illustrating the patterns of oscillation in a hydrogen atom, showing that the number of peaks in the waveform corresponds to different field intensities. It emphasizes de Broglie's insight that if the electron is made of waves, then the number of waves must be an integer, resulting in discrete energy states. The book also explores the philosophical implications of the continuous and discontinuous nature of reality and highlights the different perspectives of the left and right hemispheres of the brain. It critiques the internalist theory of consciousness and the view of reality as a representation rather than a presencing. Additionally, modern science tends to reduce instances of mental life to mechanistic explanations, drawing parallels to delusions in schizophrenia and right hemisphere deficit states. McGilchrist discusses the concept of the multiverse and its implications for the existence of life and consciousness in the universe. He highlights the unimaginable intricacy and precise factors necessary for life to evolve, suggesting that the probability of such a universe existing by chance is nearly impossible. The book also explores the fine-tuning of various parameters in the universe that make its existence possible, including the ratio of gravitational to electrical forces and the value of nuclear efficiency. It presents arguments from astrophysicists and scientists who suggest that the existence of a multiverse or the fine-tuning of the universe points to the presence of an intelligent creator. The writer also delves into the many worlds interpretation and its relationship to the right hemisphere's attempt to make sense of reality. Language and reason are insufficient for understanding ultimate reality. The poet, who focuses on creating images and establishing mental connections, is better equipped to convey a deeper understanding. Language falls short in describing the depths of experience, and reason only accounts for a superficial part of mental life. The author proposes that values, such as truth, goodness, and beauty, are not human inventions, but rather intrinsic to the universe. Science, while valuable in its own right, fails to acknowledge the importance of values. Truth is not a human invention but a fundamental aspect of the world. It is not something to be possessed, but a process to be followed. McGilchrist also discusses the role of love in understanding and knowing truth, arguing that love is not just an emotional experience, but a foundation for value and knowledge. He criticizes the Western approach to knowledge, which often involves detachment and a loss of connection with the subject. Instead, advocating for a disposition of openness and affection in the pursuit of understanding. Value perception is an inherent aspect of human perception. Value is the first indicator of the nature of something, even before the object itself is fully understood. The philosopher Guido Cusinato elaborates on this idea by stating that value announces and shapes the expression and meaning of an object. However, value perception is not always accurate and can be influenced by experience and judgment. The left hemisphere tends to view value as separate from the world and utility-driven, while the right hemisphere sees value as intrinsic to the cosmos and revealed in a precognitive, holistic manner. The author also discusses the role of the right hemisphere in moral decision-making, suggesting that it considers intention and context more effectively than the left hemisphere. He critiques the utilitarian approach to ethics, highlighting the limitations of thought experiments and the need to embrace uncertainty and intuition in moral judgments. Morality cannot be reduced to a purely cognitive calculation of pleasure and utility. The right hemisphere of the brain plays a significant role in moral judgments, while the left hemisphere tends to promote antisocial behavior. The author also discusses the drawback of pursuing individualistic pleasure and autonomy without considering other values and the impact on society, suggesting that happiness and meaning are both important aspects of a fulfilling life and that self-esteem should be earned through ethical behavior and achievements. Autonomy as a principle for moral decision-making must be considered alongside the impact on human dignity and cultural values. Humans and animals have an innate sense of morality and cooperation. Social behavior of animals, such as monkeys and primates, demonstrates altruism and a desire for peace within their groups. McGilchrist also suggests that humans have a natural inclination towards honesty and pro-social behavior. The writer criticizes reductionist science for promoting cynicism and selfishness, and emphasizes the importance of intuition and virtue ethics in guiding moral decision-making. The writer explores the concept of beauty in nature and humans, arguing that beauty goes beyond the predictions of evolutionary psychology and is not solely related to reproductive success. He questions why humans find certain aspects of nature, such as the colors and forms of plants, beautiful when they do not share a common ancestor with insects. Beauty in humans is not synonymous with sexiness and can exist independently. The prevailing materialist account of the cosmos often marginalizes beauty, viewing it as surplus to utility. However, the author suggests that beauty is foundational and plays a crucial role in human experience. The appreciation of beauty seems to be a primal instinct, and the development of beautiful objects and materials predates their practical utility. The universality of beauty is evident in cross-cultural agreement on what is considered beautiful. Beauty is often associated with harmony and the appreciation of relations between similar yet different things, which is a strength of the right hemisphere of the brain. It is beyond language and cannot be fully captured or possessed, making it ineffable and elusive. Art is a way for humans to express their sense of beauty, and that the appreciation of beauty enriches our spiritual capabilities. However, measuring the correlates of beauty and understanding its contribution from each hemisphere of the brain is challenging due to the complexity of aesthetic appreciation and subjective differences. The author examines the relationship between beauty and symmetry, specifically in the context of artistic expression, suggesting that while symmetry is often associated with beauty, it is not a necessary condition for it. The concept of wabi-sabi, in Japanese aesthetics, emphasizes imperfection and incompleteness as elements of beauty. The right hemisphere of the brain appears to play a significant role in the perception and appreciation of beauty, particularly in relation to symmetry. Furthermore, McGilchrist explores the connection between beauty and contrast, highlighting the importance of shadows and darkness in creating a sense of beauty. The analysis suggests that beauty is not solely determined by symmetry, but rather is a complex interplay of various qualities and elements. McGilchrist then argues that purpose can be understood in different ways. Extrinsic purpose is instrumental and serves an end, while intrinsic purpose is fulfilled in the process itself. The left hemisphere tends to focus on extrinsic purpose and utility, while the right hemisphere recognizes the intrinsic purpose in celebrating life, creativity, and uniqueness. He also highlights the difference between deterministic and free accounts of purpose, as well as the importance of a broad, overarching view. Arguing that a reductionist perspective, which disregards purpose and focuses on detail, fails to make sense of value, beauty, and consciousness. However, purpose cannot be fully defined and is best approached through science, reason, intuition, and imagination. The author discusses the concept of purpose in relation to Darwinian natural selection. He challenges the idea that purpose is only apparent and argues that there can be both intrinsic and extrinsic purposes in life. The distinction between detailed plans and flexible processes is highlighted, emphasizing the need for a sense of direction but also the importance of allowing for freedom and adaptability. He also explores the role of scale in understanding purpose, stating that purposes can exist at different levels and are not necessarily limited to individual organisms. Purpose can coexist with randomness, and that randomness itself is a necessary part of nature's purposiveness. Purpose and indeterminacy are not mutually exclusive, and that purposeful actions can coexist with chance occurrences. The concept of chroides is introduced as possible paths of development that canalize streams of change within a landscape. McGilchrist also discusses the active role of cells in promoting mutations and the complexity of biological systems necessary for life. He questions the idea of unadulterated chance as the driving force behind evolution and highlights the improbability of life emerging solely through random processes. Arguing that purpose is a reasonable assumption in understanding the nature of the universe and is compatible with science. The choice between purpose and an infinite number of universes is a philosophical rather than scientific one. The relationship between purpose and drive is discussed. While a purpose may lead to conflicting drives, it is necessary for complex and beautiful life. The idea of purpose in the universe is explored, with the author arguing against the notion that the universe is inhospitable to life. He also examines examples of purpose in nature, such as instinctual behaviors and the adaptations of parasites and viruses. Purpose does not necessarily align with what humans perceive as good or desirable. The tendency of life to complexity is discussed, along with the idea that purpose is foundational in the cosmos. Living beings have intrinsic purpose and express it through their actions. Life is not a problem to be solved or a mechanism to be exploited, but a dance to be celebrated. The purpose of life is to appreciate and recognize the value of existence. McGilchrist also explores the evolution of complex organisms and questions why they evolved towards creatures with lower survival prospects. He suggests that life has a tendency towards greater complexity and higher levels of awareness. The concept of purpose in nature is also addressed, with the argument that purpose exists beyond just solving local problems but also in the tendency towards greater complexity and awareness. The denial of purpose is criticized, with the suggestion that it undermines the scientific world picture and our own convictions. Denying purpose leads to improbable claims and a loss of substance in understanding how purpose works in nature. The author highlights the confusion around the meaning of purpose and the misconception that it implies the existence of a divine creator. He then transitions to a different order of questions: why the universe exists and why it exhibits complexity, order, beauty, and the capacity for life and consciousness. Understanding the cosmos requires acknowledging the mystery of its existence and the limitations of scientific explanations. The concept of the ground of being is introduced as a way to explore the profound philosophical question of why there is something rather than nothing. The left hemisphere's limited understanding and the right hemisphere's capacity for awe and intuition are also discussed. The author explores the difficulty of capturing the source of all things, referred to as the ground of being, through language. He discusses how the Eastern traditions of Confucianism and Taoism also acknowledge the limitations of language in describing the ineffable. The Western tradition has sequestered the sacred from everyday life and struggles to reconcile the concept of God with language. Various attempts to explain the ground of being, such as positing an uncaused cause or relying on brute emergence, are shown to fall short. The author emphasizes the importance of an UN word, a placeholder that acknowledges the limitations of language while holding space for the ineffable. The discussion highlights the need to approach the ground of being through a via negativa, recognizing that all positive assertions about it will be false. He emphasizes the importance of understanding our unknowingness as we strive to explore the nature of the divine. McGilchrist discusses the concept of God and its relevance in understanding the mysteries of existence, arguing that invoking God is not meant to provide an explanation, but rather to ensure that we do not lose sight of life's deepest enigmas. The recognition of God is not an answer, but a way to fully understand the questions themselves. He explores the limitations of language and emphasizes the distinction between something beyond our grasp and something beyond our knowledge. He suggests that a disposition towards the divine, characterized by awe and wonder, is necessary to appreciate the immensity of what cannot be known. Such a disposition is associated with the right hemisphere of the brain, which is more open to the unknown and intuits the reality beyond our understanding. The left hemisphere, while responsible for reasoning and knowledge accumulation, is incapable of comprehending the ground of being and experiencing a deeper awareness. However, the left hemisphere serves an important role in highlighting its own limitations and drawing attention to the need for a different approach. This is where the right hemisphere comes in, which is better equipped to engage with the unknown and the divine through metaphor, paradox, and intuitive understanding. McGilchrist emphasizes the importance of not knowing and unlearning in order to truly perceive and connect with the divine. He also highlights the need to move beyond the constraints of language and propositional knowledge to encounter and know the divine. Direct awareness, or a deeper engagement with the world, can lead to a sense of spirituality and connectedness to something greater. The author shares personal experiences, such as a deep connection to nature and the arts, as well as encounters with spiritual texts and rituals. He also criticizes the dominant left hemisphere disposition in our society, which seeks control and mastery over the world, and emphasizes the importance of reclaiming a religious disposition that values depth and reverence for creation, arguing that this perspective can bring meaning and transformation to life. The author discusses the loss of depth in time, space, emotion, and understanding as a consequence of right hemisphere suppression. This loss has led to an instrumentalist view of the world, where everything is transformed into a tool. This loss of depth has also affected religious symbols and their meaning. Religious symbols, such as the story of the fall of man, have been misunderstood and reduced to literal stories, losing their profound psychological descriptions of the human predicament. McGilchrist emphasizes the importance of a sense of the sacred, which is both personal and shared, and realized through music and rituals. Religion, at its best, serves as a reminder of a broader context, a moral order, and a network of obligations to others in the world. It embodies a disposition towards the world characterized by humility, compassion, and reverence. The author suggests that religion offers deep, imaginative archetypal truths about the human condition that cannot easily be expressed in scientific propositions, but require personal experience and participation. Language is limited when it comes to expressing the divine, and that attempts to define God or the sacred using words often fall short. Instead, the author argues that poetry and metaphor are more appropriate for conveying the ineffable nature of the divine. He suggests that the left hemisphere of the brain, which is associated with language and rational thought, can play a role in supplementing religious practices with theology. However, the left hemisphere should serve as a tool and should not try to fully comprehend or explain the mysteries of the divine. Understanding the divine requires a balance between the intuitive, holistic perception of the right hemisphere and the analytical, linguistic approach of the left hemisphere. The author discusses the need for both autonomy and community, as well as reason and imagination, in the development of a moral code and the propagation of good works. He draws upon the distinction between halakha and agadah in the rabbinic tradition, highlighting the importance of both literal and metaphorical teaching. He further delves into the theological speculation of panentheism, which posits that the divine is immanent in all things while also transcending them, suggesting that relationship is lost when religious perspectives collapse into either a purely immanent or transcendent view of the divine. Process theology has roots in various traditions including pre-Socratic philosophy, Taoism, Buddhism, and Christian mysticism, with Whitehead being credited as the originator of process theology. The writer emphasizes the importance of flow, time as an expression of extended flow, the relationship between consciousness and matter, and the purposiveness of the world without reductive, predetermined purposes. He also delves into religious and philosophical texts that discuss the idea of becoming, such as the story of Moses and the burning bush, and the concept of God as love. McGilchrist's book explores the concept of reconciling flux and stasis, change and permanence in relation to the worlds of the right and left hemispheres of the brain. It references Coleridge's belief in the need to reconcile the struggles of the finite with the permanent, as well as Schelling's philosophy of nature as the living ground of a continuously incarnating divinity. The imagination helps to constitute the world as it truly is, and that God and the world interact dialectically to bring each other into being. The author discusses the nature of reality as a continuous process of movement and unfoldment, emphasizing the importance of becoming over being. He also explores the idea of holachis, nested structures where each part reflects the whole. The concept of the hidden and manifest aspects of reality is explored, as expressed in the Tao Te Ching and Nicholas of Cusa's writings. It suggests that the darkness of unknowing and the reconciliation of opposites are significant in understanding the nature of God and the cosmos. God is not simply a oneness, but a unity that reconciles opposites. McGilchrist also discusses the importance of panentheism, which allows for a relationship between God and the created world. He emphasizes the need for immanence and transcendence, and the role of humanity in the ongoing process of creation. From a left hemisphere perspective, a religion often emphasizes power and certainty, limiting the creativity and vulnerability required for love. However, the author proposes a different understanding of God, stating that being both omniscient and omnipotent is incompatible with being a God of love. Instead, God is all-knowing and all-powerful in a right hemisphere sense, which involves openness, receptivity, and allowing things to grow. This perspective aligns with the idea that creation is the result of the interaction between unlimited potential and limited actuality, shaping each other through a continuous reciprocal process. Negation is creative and highlights various levels of negation in the structure and function of the brain. Negation is necessary for the tension and complementarity that give rise to new possibilities. In the Kabbalah, the principle of love and the power of restraint are both essential for the existence of the cosmos. Similarly, in human development, boundaries and discipline alongside acceptance and unconditional love are needed for security and growth. McGilchrist also touches on the idea that beauty and the experience of the sublime speak to something beyond our everyday understanding, evoking a sense of another realm. Negation is not just a limit on freedom, but is itself liberating, creating a space for creativity and possibility. The constant emphasis on the unknowability of God may give the impression that God is remote and abstract, but in reality, God is present in all aspects of life. McGilchrist argues that there is no conflict between reason and religion, and that belief in God can serve as the basis for knowledge and understanding. He acknowledges that belief in God cannot be proven through argument, but suggests that having a belief in place can provide reassurance and scaffolding for those seeking truth. He also discusses the idea of Pascal's wager, which posits that it is rational to believe in God given the potential consequences of being wrong. The author discusses the obsession with truth as correctness and the focus on detail, which are characteristic of the left hemisphere's approach to issues. This results in a loss of the deeper vision and understanding embedded in the Christian mythos, particularly in relation to the doctrine of the Trinity. He argues that fundamentalism, whether in religion or other contexts, arises from a left hemisphere mindset that seeks control and power rather than understanding. This mindset leads to dogma, contention, and a rejection of imagination and metaphor. He also highlights the similarities between militant atheism and religious fundamentalism, both driven by the left hemisphere's need for certainty and a literal interpretation of truth. McGilchrist emphasizes the importance of embracing uncertainty and being open to multiple perspectives in approaching big questions about the world. He argues against the idea that science and religion are incompatible, criticizing analytic philosophy for its inability to approach the divine or spiritual matters, as it relies on declarative and rational methods that are unable to capture the richness and complexity of spiritual experiences. He also highlights the arrogance and intolerance exhibited by militant atheism, which mimics religious zealotry, emphasizing the importance of recognizing that there can be different forms of truth, including metaphoric truth, and that science and religion have different methods and purposes. False conflict between science and religion has limited clear thinking and narrowed the scope of inquiry, and suggests that science should distance itself from the dogmatism of scientism. Many great scientists have been religious, and that the majority of Nobel laureates in physics have been theists. They also criticize the one-sided portrayal of religious institutions in the development of science and refute popular misconceptions such as the belief that people thought the world was flat until Columbus. The importance of acknowledging the limitations of both science and religion is emphasized, and the need for them to coexist and work together towards a better understanding of the world is emphasized. Religion, as embodied in the right hemisphere of the brain, plays a crucial role in human existence. Left hemisphere's focus on control and calculation has led to a disenchantment with the world, resulting in a loss of meaning and purpose. By contrast, the right hemisphere's capacity for wonder and awe enables a connection to the divine and a recognition of something greater than ourselves. Religion allows us to see ourselves as part of a larger whole, connecting us to one another and the natural world. Wonder, enchantment, astonishment, delight, and joy are not something that can be controlled or manufactured, but rather experiences that happen to us. Trying to use them for a specific purpose destroys their essence. Humility is also crucial, as it allows for a proper understanding of the divine and avoids a master-slave mentality. The decline of a collective belief system provided by religion has contributed to the current ecological crisis. While unconventional spirituality has its appeal, there is value in learning from traditional religious traditions and their rituals. It is important to recognize the limitations of science and the need for a moral compass. McGilchrist also emphasizes the significance of culture and the potential decline of society if culture is lost. The argument is made for the importance of religion and spirituality in enriching life and providing a common focus beyond pragmatic concerns. Religion holds a crucial role in society, regardless of personal beliefs, as it is mankind's most important function. The rejection of the sacred began with the Enlightenment, distancing ourselves from the divine. This abandonment has led to a focus on human power and the exploitation of nature through technology. Pride and arrogance have replaced humility and reverence, leading to a disregard for others and a loss of shame. Death is avoided and not contemplated, robbing life of its meaning. However, if we acknowledge the potential for an afterlife and the interconnectedness of life and death, we can find significance in our existence and understand the mutual relationship between life and death. Evil is necessary for moral issues to arise and for moral goals to be achieved. Resistance and suffering in nature are essential for creativity and self-organization. McGilchrist questions the presence of evil in a world created by an omnipotent God and suggests that evil is not a mere privation of good, but a real force with its own drive and purpose. Evil and good are inherently intertwined and cannot be completely separated, and that their eventual union represents redemption and the fulfillment of creation. According to the Kabbalists, humans have the responsibility to recognize and foster the differences within the finite world while also understanding the unity of all things. This is illustrated in the Iroquois myth of two brothers, one of whom remembers his divine origins while the other does not. The brother who forgets relies on language and tools, but can only create monsters. The other brother, who can create life, tries to redeem his brother's creations. The author suggests that there is a true human being, like Adam and Eve before the fall, and the flawed human beings we are. The right hemisphere of the brain, represented by he grasps the sky with both hands, provides a better understanding of reality and should be considered in conjunction with the left hemisphere's perspective. The reductionist paradigm of the left hemisphere, which views the cosmos as a purely material machine with no meaning or purpose, should be replaced with a new paradigm that aligns with knowledge from science, reason, intuition, and imagination. This new paradigm, supported by both brain science and physics, suggests that the universe is in constant process and emerges from interconnected relationships and interdependencies. Consciousness plays a role in this process, and matter is not ontologically prior to consciousness. The final chapters and epilogues of books often lack the nuances and complexities of the preceding content. However, a concluding chapter is usually necessary. In this epilogue, the author acknowledges that it is not a summary of the book's argument, but rather a projection into the relevance of the philosophy presented in the book to our contemporary world. The author asserts that we are experiencing a crisis of meaning and have become divorced from nature, alienated from society, and indifferent to the divine. These divorces have come about due to an excess of hubris and have led to significant consequences such as despoliation of the planet, social disintegration, mental health epidemics, and a loss of context, among others. The author suggests that we need to change our path in order to survive as a civilization and species. McGilchrist highlights the problem of relying too heavily on the left hemisphere of the brain in contemporary Western culture. This over-reliance leads to a version of the world that is impoverished and lacking in meaning, fitting more for a computer than a human being. The left hemisphere's linear thinking and denial of its own incoherence contribute to sustained incoherence in various aspects of society, including corporations, governments, health systems, and education. The author also discusses how bureaucracy and technology further contribute to division and disintegration. The lack of balance and the disregard for both the past and the future exacerbate the problems caused by the dominant left hemisphere. McGilchrist suggests that a shift towards a more holistic and balanced approach is necessary for true vitality and a meaningful existence. He discusses the destructive relationship between humanity and nature, highlighting the consequences of our exploitation and colonization of the natural world. Arguing that our pursuit of hedonic happiness, driven by individualism and personal pleasure, only leads to an endless yearning for more and fails to provide true fulfillment. McGilchrist also explores the negative effects of the values of power, autonomy, and structured behavior on mental health and societal well-being, suggesting that the loss of sorrow as a cultural value and the overvaluing of power and success have led to a lack of empathy, connection, and a sense of purpose. The author suggests that the left hemisphere's attack on nature is ultimately an attack on life itself. Our skepticism towards nature stems from our desire to control and manipulate it according to our own rules. However, this mindset has led to a loss of wisdom and humor, and an overemphasis on seeking power. He also highlights the importance of recognizing the interconnectedness and unity of all things, as well as the need for a different understanding of reality that includes imagination, intuition, and a sense of wonder. The author concludes by stating that we must embrace a myth or narrative that is truer and more holistic in order to change our values and behaviors, and ultimately save ourselves and the world. McGilchrist emphasizes the interconnection between neurology, philosophy, and physics, stating that these disciplines are essential for understanding human minds and lives. He discussed the significance of the bipartite human brain, referencing the work of neuroscientist and philosopher Roger Sperry. Sperry believed that modern society discriminates against the right hemisphere of the brain and argued that addressing the underlying human values is crucial for addressing global issues. Replacing the dominance of the left hemisphere with a balanced partnership between the hemispheres requires effort and demands more from us. Reason and science are essential but have been narrowed and tarnished by dogma. McGilchrist suggests that exploring wisdom from various traditions, including mysticism and religious texts, can provide valuable insights. He argues against completely repudiating the idea of God and emphasizes the importance of finding the core wisdom in this universal concept. Finally, He concludes by quoting Angelus Silesius, "Friend, that is surely enough. And should you want to read more, then go and become yourself the words, and yourself the being." Thank you so much for watching this video. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We'll see you in the next video.